What is up, my friends? We are back with the Role Clarity Roundup, and today is going to be all about what does it look like to be a lead pastor, but especially a church planting bivocational lead pastor. Now, this is part of a series focusing on local church ministries with the goal of helping leaders think strategically about how they can communicate the role clarity for the critical positions on their team and for themselves. I'm Lee Taylor, and I help leaders of churches revolutionize the way they create role clarity for their teams. We believe role clarity can be created quickly, simply, and in a way that it's actually used, that it's more than just an HR process, but it can actually be key to giving leaders the tools and the skills they need to maximize every team member and to build a thriving team. I'm excited today to have Michael Scobey with us. Michael serves as a lead pastor at Vibrant Church in the Woodlands, Texas, where he planted the church 3 years ago. And so I'm excited for you guys to meet him, for us to have a great conversation today. So without further ado, welcome, Michael. How are you today?
I'm great. How's it going, guys? Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you there, even if you do have the Cowboys paraphernalia there, which kind of gives you away a little bit.
I know. Y'all pray for me. I'm a glutton for punishment, if you will.
Awesome. So, what is your Vibrant Church, kind of your origin story? How did you come to be there to plant this church? Give us a little bit of the background.
Yeah, so my wife and I and my family, we were living in Beaumont, Texas, and we served at a wonderful church there in Beaumont. And we had really planned on being there long term. And Hurricane Harvey changed some things for us. Really, honestly, looking forward, we had 3.5 foot of water in our church campus, and we had 5.5 foot of water in our living room. And so we literally watched our kids' toys float down Village Creek in Lumberton, Texas. And, that was kind of a changing season for us. Uh, we almost kind of ended up in a wilderness season where we're like, okay, God, what is next? What's going to happen here? What do you think? And so we ended up in a little bit of a wilderness season. And inside of that, what we found is that direction will come after we have a spirit of surrender. And so when we finally just surrendered, all right, God, what do you want to do here? Let's stop with the job interviews. Let's stop with the, meeting all the boards and all of the things. Let's just figure out what you want us to do. We felt that call to plant Vibrant Church, and that was confirmed through the council, our pastoral council in our lives. And we didn't have a neon sign that said "Come to the Woodlands." And but that being said, we honestly looked at 4 different cities in Texas in which that we would see ourselves planting a church, and areas that needed churches. And we chose the Spring Woodlands area because of the growth in the area, the great schools, and it was voted the number one place to raise a family by Consumer Report 3 years in a row. And so that's obviously going to attract a lot of people that need Jesus. And so, and it doesn't hurt to live in a great place like the Woodlands. And so we moved here in September of 2018, or October of 2018, and started working towards the planting season of Vibrant, where we launched in September of 2019.
Wow. And you, as far as your kind of ministry history, you'd filled like all of like a lot of the classic positions through the years as far as leading up to that. So just a quick rundown of the positions that you filled. You started ministry, what, 18 is what you said?
Yeah. So I graduated high school. I had a full ride scholarship to LSU. I actually turned that down, went to ministry school instead. And as soon as I got to ministry school, I was doing that and serving in ministry somewhere. I was hired. And so I've been doing ministry in roles of like worship pastor, band director, musician, youth pastor, associate pastor. All of the, if there's a position in a church, I've probably done it besides kids pastor, which I love. I feel like it's given me background in leading people, and it helps when you plant a church to know a lot about a lot of different types of ministry and seen it done many different ways, seen the good, the bad. You grow from certain things, and but it allows you to lead people stronger because you have some experience. You've seen a lot of things, and so that's kind of what our 20 years in ministry have looked like thus far.
Wow. Guess that you look good. You look young for 20 years in ministry at this point. So At this point, Vibrant Church, you guys have grown to run about around 400 people on a weekend. So one of the interesting things for me is that you still are bivocational, still are doing other things. So give us a little picture. What does that look like? What does your bivocational work look like?
Yeah, so in pre-launch, obviously, if there's not a church there, there's no salary that is attached to that, and so I had to provide for my family. And my wife was a nurse, and so she was the breadwinner of our home. But in that pre-launch season, I started working with a marketing company, a digital marketing company. It's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Google marketing for chiropractors, and it's been a tremendous blessing for my family because it allows me to set my own schedule where I can do ministry on my own time. I can still meet with people. It doesn't affect my church work. But then it also allows for me to provide for my family in a way, and it takes the burden of that off of our church. Really, that it has allowed us to hire more staff and do more things that are going to reach more people that we wouldn't have been able to do if the church really needed to step up and support me full time. That we needed to do that. And so, what I do is I do digital marketing for chiropractors, and then I also do weddings and premarital coaching for couples all around the city. Between those, it normally takes about 15 to 20 hours of my week. So it's not a full time job, but it's a full time responsibility, if you will. It comes down to my efficiency and my effectiveness. And so I do sales with doctors all around the world, and then account management for their online social media presence. And I really enjoy it because it keeps me fresh. And then I also get to serve somebody else's vision. It's not about me and what God's doing in me and my thoughts and my wants. I get to serve somebody else's vision, which keeps me humble. And to be honest with you, I enjoy that.
Yeah. So actually, we're talking about tri-vocational here. So with the weddings on the weekends and the marketing.
That's it, man. I honestly, I have a tough time saying no sometimes. And so,
Yeah.
I get the opportunity. I look at the weddings like an extension of ministry because there are so many weddings of people that I do in Houston that I don't know and they don't come to our church. And, I get the opportunity to connect with them, coach them, speak the word of God over their lives. And it's just a tremendous blessing to do ministry in that capacity in our city.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's turn to our challenge for today is to land, ultimately what you consider to be the four key roles for a lead pastor, how you view that, how that's played out in your situation. I think it's really unique because of the decisions you've made about being bivocational, trivocational, and having other people hiring some other staff while you kept those positions. I think it's really interesting. We're not trying to build the authoritative answer that every leader has to agree with, but to look at, how does this position play out for you in your situation, and hopefully give other leaders something to think about as they consider this for their own key roles. And maybe to give that person who's interested in possibly leading a church a perspective on what that position could look like and how it has played out, in your situation. So, understandably, the role of lead pastor looks different based on context and church size. But for our case study, we're going to kind of put that a church plan, a small church, 200 to 500 people there, which is right where you guys are. As a general rule, understanding these things change as church size changes also. But to get started, I always like to say we're going to go into the weeds. People always say, hey, I want to stay out of the weeds. We are going headlong into the weeds as far as what does it look like for you on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I always say, what fills up the calendar? What's on the to-do list? If somebody was following you around on an average week, what are the things that they're going to see you doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love that you dig into the weeds because that's I think the details are what makes a difference. And so, for me, first of all, I would say this: if you're interested in planting a church, if the first thing I would encourage you to do is to talk to your pastoral council and to people that you trust that help lead your life. And if they can talk you out of it, it's not for you, because church planning, it's not the most difficult thing ever, but it's not easy, right? And so it is, it's building something from the beginning. And so in our processes, my week has changed. What my week has looked like has changed. But over the last year, I've kind of settled into a rhythm. And this is what that rhythm looks like for me. On Monday, Monday is what I call dig day. I'm digging ditches for my week. I am doing all of the prep work for for really the Lord to work through the rest of my week. And so on Mondays, I'll do things like, I very much prescribe to the football way of thinking that Monday is film day. Okay, so where football teams watch film on Monday, I watch film on Monday. I watch myself speak on Monday, sometimes multiple times, and I'm going to take notes of things that I said, mannerisms that I did, ways that I communicated, pronunciations that I may have messed up, or just so I can improve as a speaker. Right? It's film day. And so I do that. I do paperwork for my marketing job. We measure the cost per lead for every one of my clients. I'm making sure that all my reports are set with that other job. I do meetings with my marketing job on Monday, my one-on-ones, and connecting with people that my superiors, my managers, when it comes to that. I schedule my church meetings for the week all on Monday. I schedule that out. Make sure I typically don't have any day of meetings where somebody just calls and says, "Hey, I'm going to meet with you today." Like, no, you're not. That we're going to meet next week. That's just the way this is going to happen. And so I schedule my meetings for the week, and then I plan our social media posts for our church for the week with our team. And then I review and typically in the afternoon after I finish my marketing responsibilities with my other job. I review our church team reports from the weekend. And every one of our leadership members fill out a team report, and they give us the good, bad, and the ugly from the weekend. And I want to review all of that information on Monday. So, because sometimes that will feed into scheduling a meeting that I need to have later on that week. And so that's typically what I do. And then obviously, depending on my wedding schedule, I will schedule premarital coaching or prepare for premarital coaching for that week. And so that's what Monday typically looks like. Tuesday through Thursday is all about execution for me. Those are the run days. Those are the fill days. I've dug the ditches. I've done the prep work. Now it's about just taking it and running with it. Normally, I start my day in the office at 9. I drop my kids at school, and normally the day for us doesn't end until about 9 p.m. when we finish meetings and things. So Tuesday through Thursday are typically our run days. Tuesday is my sermon prep day. I get in the morning. First thing I do is I dig into sermon prep. Now, I am heavy on efficiency, and so I'm a natural worrier. And so the way that I battle that personally is like to plan ahead. I believe the Holy Spirit can speak into you and in you, but to me, I believe God works in me in a planning type mode. And so for me, that's like this week, this Tuesday, I worked on the message. I finalized this week, but I'm actually writing the message for 2 weeks from now. I'm already writing sermon series, the next sermon series that we're going into called Iconic in March. And so that's kind of what I'm working on personally. And so Tuesday in the morning from 9 to 12 is sermon prep. And then in the afternoon, I dive into staff meetings and church work that needs to be done. Tuesday, that's typically what that looks like. Wednesday and Thursday, I try to focus on the people side of ministry. If there's any visionary work that needs to be done or business side of the church that needs to be done, I try to handle that Tuesday afternoons. That way, Wednesdays and Thursdays, I'm able to handle meetings with people. If I'm giving pastoral coaching, if I'm meeting people for lunch, or if I'm doing things like this or coaching church planters, I'm going to do that on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Typically, that's the most efficient days for me to do that. And then Friday for me is my rest day. That is typically my Sabbath. I am going to be with my family, or I'm going to be on the golf course for part of the day. And that's just typically what my day looks like there. Friday evening, we like to get a date night in if we can, and try to work that. Saturdays are another family day unless I have weddings. And in that case, I would go and do a wedding and be gone a few hours and then come home. So that's typically what the rest of the week looks like. Now, Sunday looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
For me, we do 2 services currently. We're about to launch a third, but I typically get to the church about 7 a.m. ish. I sit in sound check regardless if I'm playing in the worship team or not. I sit in sound check. I get my mind right. I go to all the huddles. And then I go to the parking lot where I connect with people. That's kind of my pre-service and post-service spot. I go to the parking lot. Um, After church on Sunday is a time of silence for me. I don't schedule meetings. I don't schedule, for the most part, don't schedule events. I literally go home for the most part and do nothing. It is the time where I just honestly, I'm the least effective as a leader at that point. Like I'm just vegging and watching sports and playing Legos with my kids and maybe playing Mario Kart with my 8-year old. Like I'm literally doing nothing on Sunday afternoons intentionally just to kind of get my mind right and disconnect from all the things work because Monday is dig day again.
Yeah. Awesome. I love how you have those things categorized. And also this theme from some of the conversations of this watching film. It's just like kind of popping up of whether it's somebody who's in worship, and then you talking about that even from you as your messages. That's really interesting to me to see to hear that coming up as kind of a common idea. So I want to ask you just to dig a couple places here. So for you so it sounds like on Monday when you say dig day, I mean it's you're scheduling, you're planning. I mean that's where all of that stuff for you personally and also for the church is that all kind of happening that day on Monday?
All of that is happening that day. If I'm scheduling, if I feel like the Lord has put somebody on my heart, I'm going to reach out to him and say, hey, let's meet for lunch this week or next week and let's put it on the calendar. And you go ahead and like get all of my meetings scheduled. Do it on Monday. That way I don't have any kind of surprise meetings. And honestly, I don't leave margin for surprise meetings.
Yeah.
If there's margin left in my schedule, I go home.
Yeah.
The schedule is so busy. Last night I was in meetings until 9:30. So if I have extra margin, I'm gonna go check my kids out of school and take them to Chick-fil-A and spend time with them.
Gotcha. Excellent. So let me just ask this question because this is one I feel like in a ministry people can be some of the worst. For you, as far as building that discipline and building that expectation that you're not going to be able to meet with me at 2:30 today, like that's just not going to happen. Over time, how have people responded? I mean, do they feel like you're unavailable? They feel like they can't get in touch? I mean, what's been your experience over time?
Yeah, so I think communication is key, and we communicate to our church very often that I'm bivocational. I do another job. And that means I'm going to have responsibilities with another job, which means I'm not going to be accessible 24 hours a day. But I do preach to our church. I say, hey, look, you can have me a certain amount of time, all the time, right? You can have me 24 hours a day for 5 years and then I'm going to burn out. Or you can have me efficiently for, a few hours a week, where you connect with me and I connect with you and you can meet with me. I'm not, it's not unattainable to have a meeting with me, but then we can go on this journey for 30 years together. And that's
Yeah,
the goal. That's what I try to tell my team as well. I don't need them taking phone calls. I don't take phone calls after 9 p.m. Like I don't, at really 8 p.m. I plug my phone up and my phone stays in my kitchen. This is not in my notes, but my phone
yeah,
stays in my kitchen here. Like I don't take phone calls. If somebody calls me at 2 a.m., they're not going to get me.
yeah.
Like it's just not going to happen. That it's just disciplines that I set in because I don't want to burn out. I want to do this a long time. And for that to happen, you have to set those boundaries.
Gotcha. The other one I want to ask you is so for you, because you say Wednesday, Thursday, people focused. As far as I mean, what are some of the things that people kind of meetings that people are going to see you in? I mean, what does that look like as far as what they're going to see if they're following you on a Wednesday and Thursday?
Yeah, so it could be anything from a general coaching session with some of our leaders to I'm taking a guy in my church to lunch, or it could be I did a meeting literally this morning that was preparation for a funeral that I'm about to do. That's people focused, and so those are what those people meetings are typically focused on. They are not. They're not systematized meetings. Okay, they're focused more on building the spiritual character of people. I'm not really trying to focus on the systems of the church on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I'm always people over processes, and so I'm focusing on the people on Wednesday, Thursday. I can focus on the processes on Tuesday.
Awesome. Well, I want to stop for a second and say if you're finding value in this conversation or want to know more about role clarity or maybe more about different ministry positions, we have some more interviews that are coming up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along. Love you to be able to catch up with those. So we're going to turn now to the second portion. So we talked about going in the weeds and getting a picture of what your week looks like. But the challenge for us is to put those into the 4 buckets that make sense of what I always say the 4 key roles in a position. And the foundation of role clarity is this idea that clarity thrives within constraints. So I challenge every leader to find the 4 key roles for any position, from the top leader to the newest person that's joining the team. It's just an incredible practice to be able to get down to those 4 things and have conversation around those. And so the main ground rule that we're going to be talking about is when we label these 4 buckets, is to ask the question of, does this speak to 70% of what you spend your time doing? One challenge I always want to have for leaders is sometimes we talk about role clarity, whether it's job descriptions or the role clarity framework that I use. It can become kind of a fantasy document, these like big ideas, but it's not how people actually end up spending their week. And so that's kind of the one thing that we have there. So, without further ado, we'll jump back in and ask you, knowing all the stuff that you do, spending your week, for you, when you label kind of those 4 key roles, those 4 buckets, what sticks out to you? How would you label those?
Yeah, so I know that you said four, but like a good preacher, I only have 3 points. And
Okay,
so,
we
no,
can do.
I have three an additional one. For me, I think every pastor has to be able to do 3 things. They've got to be a shepherd, because you're the under shepherd of your flock. You've got to be a visionary, and I could go into that. So we could spend a lot of time in that. But then you've got to be a teacher as well. And so teaching people the word of God. And so now, if I were to add a fourth, the fourth that I really focus on is to be a connector of people. And that is done not in an office. I think a weakness of ministry many times is we have a lot of pastors that are office pastors. They're not pastors in their community. They're pastors of their community on Sundays, but on Tuesday, they're in their office all day. And so for me, I try to spend a lot of time in the community. I try to go and I study other places. I try to just be a connector of people, start conversations where I can. And so church planting kind of opens your eyes to these experiences and these types of leadership roles, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize the amount of business knowledge that I would need to know entering church planting. I just had no clue, right? So I read more business books and leadership books than I did before. I just never thought that was applicable to me. I needed to know more about real estate. So I connect with real estate people in our Chamber of Commerce to make sure that we're in the know, because we're looking for a building and land currently. So like I want to be in the know when it comes to that. And so when it comes to those 4 roles, it's this role of a shepherd where you're meeting with people consistently, you're discipling and developing. That is a process that never ends. You never arrive there. A visionary, honestly, in the church, I feel like we focus too much on this. Jesus had a vision, and his vision's pretty good, so I'm okay with leaning into his vision. If you're reaching people with the Great Commission, that's good enough for me. And so, but vision can be a lot of things when it comes down to that, where your local church is going. And then a teacher. I don't feel like you can spend enough time focusing on teaching the Word of God correctly and dividing the Word correctly. Um, not downloading things from the internet. Just focusing on what God is speaking to you and studying that out, being a good teacher. You know, uh, I do less of the things because I want to make sure the things that I'm supposed to do, that I do them well. And then the fourth is obviously being a connector, just being in the community, being there, getting people to know you. I have a taco place locally that when I come in, I don't even have to tell them my order. They know what I'm ordering when I come in. They get it started for me. They know who I am. They know typically I come in with somebody, but I have a relationship that's established there.
Mhm.
And I'm going to win those people. It may take years, but I'm going to win those people. I'm a connector of people. That's what I'm supposed to do.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. So it's fun. It's interesting you say that about, because nearly any pastor, ministry leader I talk to, the idea of communicating the vision, sharing the vision comes across. And I love what you said there, just about Jesus has a great vision. So for you though, because when we talked previously, you said you consider a big part to be that kind of that visioneering, that communicating that vision to the people that you're leading. For you, how does that just to kind of jump back a little bit, how does that practically play out when you look at somebody where look across? Where are the places where you see there's purposeful intention being placed? Because sometimes I'll ask somebody, so how do you communicate that vision? And they're really they struggle to point out where they're actually doing it, where they're purposefully doing that. So when you look at your own practices, where do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so there's two things. Number one, there's got to be a system for it. Number two, it's got to be simple. Like we overcomplicate vision, and then we overcomplicate it and then don't communicate it through systems. And
Yeah,
so for us, we keep our vision very, very simple. It is very gospel focused, very community focused. But then we talk about it very often when it comes to every one of our staff meetings. Every one of our huddles, we're talking about a core value. Every one of our around the corner, they're like we're over communicating it where they go, man, again, we're talking about this again. That's
yeah,
probably about the time they're starting to get it. And
yeah.
so we want to make sure there's a system for it. We want to make sure it's simple, just so people get it and they live it out.
Yeah, which I love what just happened there whenever we dug into that because I think someone could even hear your original answer about, Jesus has a great one. And I never would have caught like, hey, these people got a system behind it. There's a purpose for what they are, how they're communicating that. And I think that's it. That's an important part because that's one of the questions I can find myself asking is, so how do you make sure, because I mean, people have a lot of stuff going on to make sure that these things are covered as many times they have to for all of us who've looked at leadership books. I mean, the amount of times that we have to communicate vision for people to begin to get it, which I think is what you just said, it's a lot more than we think. A lot more.
Yeah, and then it's touch points as well, right? Ministry is people focused. It's a people business. So you have to have the touch points of you can kind of feel how their spirit's going. If they're connected with the vision of where you're going and really honestly the vision that God has for them in their ministry, if it, you can kind of feel when somebody's off and you've got but you don't feel that if you're not connected with them. And that's people driven ministry. That's discipleship.
Yeah, that's so good. And so I wanted one thing too, because you talked about teaching. So we went through your week. You talked about, which I loved how far that you're working ahead. And so you said Tuesday morning you're there 9 to 12. So somebody who listens think, oh my goodness, this guy spends 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week, preparing. It takes me 25. I mean, what are the other places where they're going to see you preparing, doing reading, as far as for to be able to teach with, like you're saying, to really know the word, to come, really prepared and do a great job.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you said that. So, although most of my preparation is done on Tuesdays, with me prepping a few weeks out, I give myself margin where there's not this pressure that I have to get this message done within this time frame. So, like this week, this message has been completed for a few weeks. But what I did on Tuesday was I added a few illustrations and I took away a few things. Well, today and yesterday, I went through and I do read throughs on my messages and I just read it through. I'm going to read it. I'm going to see how it flows. And if there's things that I like, I'm going to add in things that I don't like. I'm going to take away. There's
Right.
this constant, clipping and, trimming and adding to it and decorating and things like that. So although most of my prep is done on Tuesday, I am constant. It's a constant creative flow
Okay.
process where if I have 10 minutes, 15 minutes before between a meeting, I'm not just going to sit here and scroll Facebook. I'm going to pull open my message. I'm going to read through the first half of it. And I'm going to go, all right, this feels good. This doesn't feel good. Oh, you know what? Hey, I read this yesterday and I'm going to put this in there. Or, hey, this message is getting too long. Let me just trim here and there. It's a constant ebb and flow where I have my main study time and then I have little pieces of study time that I fit in between meetings.
Yeah, which I mean, the nugget I'm taking away is because you're ahead of the game, it gives you the freedom to not feel, which anybody who's preached feels that pressure of that Wednesday's coming, Thursday's coming, like, oh man, I got, a lot to do to get ready for Sunday.
Yeah, it's a margin thing for me, right? Our media team needs my message by Wednesday. Our worship team needs my message by Wednesday. They need all of this content. And so if I'm prepping it on a Tuesday, I feel that pressure of making sure that I get that done on Tuesday if that's the only day that I have to do that. But if I have a few weeks out, I can go, all right, well, I got a good outline and I got some illustrations and I got kind of where I'm going. Next week I'll add some more and then the next week I add some more. But then that also, from a creative angle, it allows you to not get in a writer's block, right? If you have one general idea that you're going towards and you go, you know what, I've kind of stretched that as much as I can stretch it. Let me go to next week's message and start working on that one. And then I'll get two or three working at a time. And oh, you know what? I thought about this. And that also helps your series tie in together where one message is feeding off. It's one continuous story, not, four or five individual messages. And that's what I try to pattern my preaching off of.
Wow. So that's good. So I have listed down shepherd, visionary, teacher, and then when you had to go to the fourth one, you went with connector, which I think is a really cool one, especially when you can put some real weight behind it. If there's actual places where I'm connecting with, important people who need to play a key role in the ministry or helping us help God get us where we need to go. So, if you think this exercise could be helpful for you, and you're thinking about what are your four key roles, what you would think for a lead pastor, I've created a free guide, and you can find it in the notes below that outlines our conversation and also can be used for you to do some reflection for yourself. What would I say? And I'll have some of the notes listed from our conversation and some spaces for you to work that out. And so whether you're doing it for yourself or you're thinking about it for someone else, or maybe you can go through it with a peer to say, hey, how do you do this? How do I do this? And kind of grow together. I hope it's a blessing to you, and you can find that in the description below. So now we're going to talk about digging deeper. So we've talked about going in the weeds. We clarified the four roles, but now I just want to go into some questions that are specific to your situation, Michael. And so first question was, because you have had a number of different ministry experiences, different places where you've served over the years with different types of leadership, how has that impacted your view of what a lead pastor's key roles are?
Yeah, I think so. Planting a church really opens your eyes to things. And as you become a lead pastor for the first time, you really gain wisdom and insight that you didn't have before. I can tell you that I've pretty much made contact with every one of my bosses from the past that I've ever worked for and apologized to them because I didn't truly understand the pressure that they were under. And I probably added to that pressure more than I wanted to. And so I have learned. I've been very, very blessed with great bosses over the years. And, everybody had different strengths. Some of them were more relational. I tried to take the strength of that relational leadership and do some of the things that they were doing in my current role as a lead pastor, as a church planter. Some of them were incredible speakers and great preachers. Well, I tried to take what they taught me about preaching and put that in my preaching. And I still listen to their preaching today. And I put their concepts in my preaching. Some of them, no leader is a perfect leader. So everybody has weaknesses. As much as I've learned from their strengths, I learned from weaknesses of my leaders, as much as my leaders learned from my weaknesses. And so, when we planted a church, we said, well, these are things that we're not going to do. These are non negotiables. These are ideas or values that we're going to have that are counter what we've experienced in the past. We're not going to allow this to happen. And so I think it comes down to making sure that you have a very clear vision of what your values are going to be. And so I operate with the method of VCR, values, choices, results. And so everything that I do has a value attached to it. A value leads to a choice, and that gets me the result that I want. If I want to be a great dad, it starts with a value of honoring my family, which leads to a choice of spending time with them even when I'm busy, or saying no to a meeting so I can have a family night. It leads to choices, which leads to results that hopefully my kids, as they grow up, they're going to love me and love the work of God, and they're going to, who knows, may have a calling in ministry in their life one day. So if anything, I would speak the VCR method, applying the experiences of our past in the VCR method.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So next question up is being tri-vocational. What decisions have you made in terms of how you spend your time or how you build your teams, or maybe in some of the hiring decisions you've made because of the time limitations that you have, because you do have 15 to 20 hours a week that are going to be taken up doing something else?
Yeah. So, I talked about this earlier just a little bit, but I think it's very important to understand when, which meetings to say no to, what things to say no to. That was something that I was not very good at in the first year and a half of planting the church. And We planted in September of 2019, right before the pandemic. And so I was not very good at saying no. I said yes to a lot of things. But what I've learned over just the short almost 4 years that we've been pastoring this church is that there are meetings that are not going to be the best use of my time. And I'm going to hold people back by me being in that meeting. Right now, there is a worship team meeting, the leadership meeting going on our campus. I was a worship pastor for many, many years. I could step into that meeting and I could probably contribute to that meeting, but I would be holding that meeting back from those leaders efficiently leading the departments that we've trusted them to lead by me stepping in that meeting. And it's also holding me back from doing things that I'm supposed to do, like coaching church planters, like coaching other pastors, like discipling people in our church. It's holding me back. And the thing that I've learned that I can't meet with everybody. Everybody that reaches out says, "Pastor, I want to meet with you." Well, you're gonna have to talk with my assistant, and we're gonna have to work it through that process. I need to know what your meeting's about.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't want to get into the details, but I can't meet with everybody, and that means some people won't be happy about it. But I have to say yes to the right things. If not, I'll say no to the right things. And
Yeah.
so, and so I can't meet with everybody. I will say this: protecting my family time is something that I'm learning to do. Protect my family time when I get it. If I get a day that I don't have meetings or it's a little slower, I can take a half a day. I'm absolutely going to do it. We've made it a priority in our family to travel a little bit more. Those of you that are pastors, or if you're looking at planting a church, let me just encourage you. You need to plan in a budget to travel, like to get out of your city. You need to do it. You need, because as a pastor, that city is your burden. So when you are in that city, you are burdened. And so it makes us more busy when we travel like that. But sometimes in ministry, the best thing that you can do is just get out of town and look at something different, even if it's just for a couple of days, right? You can look at different people that you're not pastoring, that you can go, that's their, they pastor them. That's not right.
Yeah.
I'm not from a business angle. I work in the business world. I don't want to worry about the business there. Like I don't want, like I'm definitely not doing a wedding in that city. So I can just show up and I can let loose and I can relax and I can just be me. Like I took my kids on a little vacation for 3 days. It's not really expensive, but we got out of town and we use points and we just get out of town and we just do nothing for 3 days. It was the most life-giving experience. I came back fired up and ready to be more efficient in the rest of my days, taking that time. Because I do have those limitations. I have to embrace them. I can't fight them. And if I do, I'll burn out. And so I have to embrace the limitations and prepare for them.
Yeah. Which I think, obviously, I talk all the time. I already represent that clarity, thrives within constraints, and I think it's one of those interesting questions that someone could do, even as a practice. Um, and I kind of give a personal reference here. Before I married my wife, I said, we got to figure out if we're on the same page about money. And I remember we were on a flight. I remember doing this, and said, okay, if we only made this amount, let's just say it was not much. And she's like, we're definitely going to make more than that if we're both working. I said, but let's just go through the practice to see how would we spend this money, to see where that, when that tension hits, what would we pick to spend it on. And it was, we still joke about it, but it was a real, important conversation for us to like have some conversations that we needed to have.
Yeah,
So I think about that for you, and you kind of bring that over to the pastor, is if they only had 20 hours, if they only had 25 hours, how would you spend that time? Because I
that's
think
it.
within that constraint and having time for your family, it forces you to maybe have some of these bigger conversations of, okay, what are the most important things? How do I make sure I make time for those? So I really, really like that. And let me let that segue to our next question. So if you were to go full time, if all those things came up, there was no marketing job, there were, was no weddings, and it was just going to be this, how do you think that your time would be spent differently? What would change for you if you were to make that switch into being full time and doing nothing but pastoral ministry? I don't even know if that's your plan. I just want to ask the question theoretically.
Yeah, that's a great hypothetical, and I'm sure at some point we will cross that bridge. But for me, if kind of wandering down that a little bit in my thought process, preparing for today, I think I would focus on creating more discipleship content for the local church, not just our church, but the local Big C church. I would focus on using our experiences to maybe write some books. that are going to help people in their daily walk with the Lord. I really don't have an interest in writing a bestseller, but I have an interest in helping people on a daily basis improve their walk with the Lord, create more coaching videos that would help in our local context. I would spend more time coaching church planters because I feel like we need more. We need more churches. Our country is still growing. The world is growing. I mean, there are billions and billions of people that I would focus on more time on coaching church planters and even church planters that are going to go overseas. And how do we create context for church planters to go to? We coach church planters all over, but there's some in many other countries that we help them create the context locally. Well, that just requires time for conversation. Pastors, in my opinion, should be conversation starters, and so kind of going back to the connector role. If I had more time that I was not focused on whether the cost per lead was great or I'm talking to a doctor in Singapore about our services,
Yeah.
I would focus on more on being a connector. I'd be more in the public and just be there and create be a conversation starter. I would sit in the coffee shop and say, "Hey, I see you're reading that book. I like that book. Talk to me. What do you do for a living?" And you start connecting with people, being involved with more chamber of commerce events. We're very involved there already to start. But I'm just kind of just jogging my memory of things that
Yeah.
I would do if I had a little bit more time. It would be very much people focused. We have a very strong team that is very heavily focused on the systems. I am, as much as I believe in systems, I am not the guy that you want putting together the system. I am the guy that you want selling the system to the people. And so our team understands that, and they do a wonderful job of living that and creating it, so I can focus on the things that really I do well, and that's with people and the people side of ministry.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I really took away from our previous conversation was from the same thing of from the limitations and not having that time is having to stay more in your sweet spot and let people take those areas that are not strengths for you, which I think once again is one of the challenges whenever you're going to spend 40, 50, 55 hours is you kind of do have time to have your hands in more stuff, which is not always the the best use of your time or bringing about leaders around you.
Right. If you do that, there's going to be a lid on your leadership. There just is. You are going to have to empower people around you. And honestly, one thing that like, create avenues in which that they can fail in a controlled environment for them to grow. Failure is fun if you do it that way because people are growing and people are experiencing that you believe in them and you believe in where they're going and what God has for them. If you try to do it all, you're mixing that, you're getting all the ingredients, you're putting the jambalaya together, you're mixing it, you're making the cornbread, you're doing all the things. Let me just tell you, you're going to have a lid on your leadership. You got to be able to release it and let some people lead. And I'm very thankful. Any of my team that's watching this, I want you to know I love you and I believe in you. And I'm so thankful for you because you guys are rock stars.
And great parts. I've heard you talk about it off camera, and you say that exact same thing, and you actually talk so much about how much you need them, and the blessing they are. So our final question is: how have your expectations changed about the key roles for a lead pastor as your length of tenure has grown?
Yeah, so kind of leaning into what we were just talking about, I realized that the less I do, the more effective I am at what I'm supposed to be doing, right? The less that I'm trying to create my own thing. So, but for me, it's to realize that I had to stop stirring long enough to realize what I was supposed to be doing was more important for me. For instance, music. I'm very good at it. I am not in an egotistical way, but I'm a very solid keyboard player. And, I had a full ride scholarship to LSU for music. Like I worked hard at it. But in my role now, I don't need to be as involved in the worship department. That's not where I need to focus my energies. I need to empower leaders that are great. They are wonderful. They're better than me, right? Rather than me being involved because of my opinions and how I want to see it. Like we have developed a system now where they kind of anticipate what I'm already thinking, and they do it better than what I would do it, right? But if I were involved in all of that, it wouldn't be very effective. So, as a lead pastor, I think all lead pastors should know the real estate situation of their church and their community, their entire city. They need to know the hot spots. They need to know where the new neighborhoods are coming in. They need to know where things are selling off. You need to be prepared to make moves that are in the best interest of the kingdom. I know we're not supposed to be businessmen or CEOs, and I'm not calling pastors to be CEOs. I don't know that that's healthy, but I think being a pastor requires financial wisdom and to be kingdom minded to move the big C church ahead with finances and not have castle mindedness where it's just about your family and providing for your family, but it needs to be about moving the kingdom forward and trusting God to provide. And that's something that we've kind of built our ministry and our family off of. I think the biggest goal for a pastor, maybe to kind of close this question out, is to remind people that everything is spiritual. Everything that they face in life is spiritual. Every conversation they walk into, every meeting they're in, as a pastor, your prep time and uh, but for the normal person, their meetings that they're going into, their job, their accountants, they're a realtor, they're showing homes, they're a CEO, they have a board meeting. The goal is to have them walk into every one of those experiences, remembering that everything is spiritual. Every conversation is spiritual. And if you can get people to think through that lens, you can change people's lives.
Yeah.
That's really what Christianity is all about. That you filter everything through the lens that Jesus cares and he is with me and that I'm in a battle and he's walking with me in this. And so I think our job as pastors is just to remind people that everything is spiritual every day,
Yeah.
regardless of the situation.
Well, I think it's such an important point too, because I think you hear these conversations about someone gets into a lead pastor position and just realize all of the things that they're touching, all the conversations they're having, all like you said, the business, the leadership stuff that can kind of throw somebody off about, is this spiritual enough? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And so I think even just close with
Yep.
that of that there's a filter that everything I touch, everything I look at is spiritual. There is, it's not like this divide of the secular and the sacred, but it's all part of the same conversation. And so I think that's a really great way to be thinking about it.
100%. 100%. I think over time, if you have that mentality, you're going to build disciples that have that mentality. And it's going to, that's a revival mentality to me,
Yeah,
because you're just looking at life through a different lens. So when you do that, you can face troubles, but you also know how to handle victory.
that's awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. Big thanks to our friend Amos who connected us, who was the connector, and said, "Hey, you need to talk to Michael. He is the guy. He's great conversation." So he was spot on about that. So I thank you, Amos, for helping me out. And Michael, thanks for sharing your heart for um, planning churches, but also understanding how to be bivocational, trivocational, and some of the benefits that even happen in that's what I hear from the conversation. There really can be some benefits in those early days of understanding that. So thanks again. So glad that you joined us. If you're wanting to know more about Role Clarity and what this looks like, you can check out the description below or go to roleclarity.co, roleclarity.co to learn more. You can download a free video series, learn more about Role Clarity. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. I also created a reflection/discussion guide to help you walk through the process of answering what you believe to be the 4 key roles for a church planner. So whether you want to do this for yourself or maybe you want to talk with a friend to see how you both would answer these questions, you can find the link in the description below and it'll walk you step by step through the process of determining what you consider to be the 4 key roles for a church planner. Hope it's a blessing. Definitely go and check it out.